Hey guys, this is Earnest James, host of the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, and I got a question to ask you. Could you buy me a cheeseburger? Better yet, could you buy me a value meal? Yes? Well, guess what? I don't need a value meal. However, for the cost of a value meal, you can support this podcast to keep us on the air. Just go to Patreon/Deal to Heal podcast and choose any one of the three tiers that's available. And if you just want to make a one-time donation, go to Cash App and make a donation to $E James, the number 418. Make a one-time donation to the Cash App, or again, go to Patreon to support this podcast and keep us on the air. Thanks in advance. Be blessed. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey, welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I am on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. To deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys for joining us once again. One more time, we are actually in season 2, episode number 24. We're just pushing along. And just like always, I'm here with a very special guest, my own friend, Miss Trinette. How are you doing?
I'm simply blessed. How are you?
I am well. I want to jump right into it. So for us to get started, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them exactly what it is that you do?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is a very blessed event. I thank you so much for considering me. So thank you so much. I am Coach Trinette Collier. I am a certified relationship coach. And what that entails means I assist people with dealing with healing, basically, but starting with building self-love. So I can teach you how to love everybody else. I really can't, but it starts with yourself. So that's my niche. I teach people how to build self-love.
All right. So, Miss Trinette, I've been waiting for this for a minute, right? And so, just to give our listeners a little bit of background of how we came in contact with each other.
Yeah.
For those of you, most of y'all know that my name on Instagram is Friends of Fatherless Daughters. Mm-hmm. And I started that platform last year. And last year was a blessing to me because I was blessed to be able to be on several podcasts as a guest. One of those podcasts was on a podcast with you, mm-hmm. and I think that was the messages from him.
Yeah,
I always get the name mixed up.
Yeah,
and I was on there. Such an awesome experience. Awesome experience. I definitely loved the feedback that I got and the interaction with the host as well as the people that was chiming in. Still one of my favorite ones to go back and watch because I do go back and watch some of my guest appearances, and definitely that's one of my top ones that I like to go back and watch. And so since then, I haven't been able to get back on with you guys, but this opportunity right now, I think, is even more of a blessing because it shows how things come full circle.
Yes,
because at the time that I talk with you guys, a podcast. My own podcast wasn't even in the plans. Hadn't even came across my mind.
Yeah.
But yet again, when this opportunity came and I came across your platform and I seen you as a coach, and that was a new light for me. I'm like, that was what she was doing. And so then I was like, you know what? I got to have you on. Number one, just to extend that same courtesy that you extended to me, for one, and then number two, I support what you're doing
Yeah.
anyway. And so
Thank
I was
you.
like, okay, I gotta have her on. We gotta connect.
Yeah.
And like I said, just to see it come full circle. I think you're the second person whose podcast I was on last year that
Okay.
I've had on my podcast this year. So
Oh, that's
I'm glad,
awesome.
because I definitely wanted to reach out to those
Yeah.
individuals who reached out to me to give me
Yeah.
that opportunity to definitely allow them to have their voice heard
Yeah.
on my platform. So I'm definitely glad. So speaking of the podcast,
Hmm.
um, I know it's messages from him. How did you guys even come up with that concept? And tell me a little bit about the platform, because I never got a chance to ask you guys when you guys asked me to be on. I was just like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
on, you know. But then after watching it, after I
Yeah.
was on it, and then plus watching it, since then, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of
Yeah.
like it. So how did you guys even come up with that whole concept?
Well, actually, it was you've got mail messages from him. That was what God birthed in me to give Black men a platform where they can share life,
Mhm.
finances, love, relationships, all of that. And so he birthed it in me. I was nervous because I was not thinking of radio, podcast, any of that. And I asked, I pitched it, and um, the fellas at that time, they were interested in it, and they were like, okay, you have a show. And that's how it was birthed. And I just recently changed the name over to the mail room messages from him. So it's still MALE for copyright reasons, trademark. So it is now officially mine, the mail room messages from him. So we'll be rebooting it this spring 22. So that's how it just allowed men to come on and talk about life issues, because what God had placed in my spirit was that we as women really don't listen to you all, and you all have a lot to say,
I would say, rewind. I wish I had a rewind, but I was like, say that again.
We know. And I had to admit, I was one of those people, one of those women. I'm just like, I know, I'm this, that, another, and me and God had to say, you know what, you really don't listen, So he put it in me. He was like, give them a chance, listen to them, if we're constantly talking about you all are the head and not the tail, we have to be obedient and do that. So as a kingdom, as a faith walk, in that faith walk and kingdom building, I had to be obedient. I'm like, okay. I was nervous, but when I tell you the feedback has been phenomenal, the men, the feedback from men have just been awesome. It's like, oh, you mean I get to talk and y'all get to listen? So that's how it was birthed. That's how it began.
How long were you guys on, or are you guys on?
We're still on. We're just taking a hiatus, just because just to give everything a break, and just come back. Like I said, reboot it. I actually went on in 2018. So for 3 years, when I ended it, so I just ended at a different location. So now I'll be rebooting it with a different cast, and just a different location. So we'll be coming back in March. Hopefully in April. We're scheduled to come back in April.
Okay, cool. So another question, 'cause I think I heard you say, or if I'm not mistaken, are you also doing another podcast that deals with your platform now with the coaching program?
Yes. So I will actually have two. I originally had my first book was Woman on Fire. And so out of that, that was really basically a journal about my divorce at that time. And so out of that was birthed a podcast called Woman on Fire, and where I would talk with women who've gone through. And so recently with the Steps Coaching, I just renamed it. So both podcasts actually will be coming out in the springtime. So one for the men and one for the women. But actually it goes all hand in hand because I coach both men and women, but just on different platforms. And because all of us need that self-love, and we don't really think about men needing, to the self-love, but it's actually you all need it as well. So this is allowing me to tackle both.
Okay, and that's gonna be a lot of work because I got my hands full with my one. But you know what? I think once you get into it, like podcasting, I think I at least for me, I related to how some people relate to tattoos, right? It's like you get one and then it's like, all right, you got one, but now you got to get another one. You know, because when I started this one, I already have like two other ideas for two more, and I'm like, okay, just slow down. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, look, let's get this one going good. But you know, once you get into it, especially when it's something that you love and it's something that allows you to be free and to be who you are and to express yourself, the way that you want to. Sometimes, that love for what you do and that imagination starts to work and it just, just start pushing forward. You have to hold on. So it's, man,
I definitely was
you
like,
busy.
I said, Jesus, I was like, wait a minute. What, when you get the message from God, it's like, you got to do it. And I was like, wait a minute, you want me to do two? I'm like, okay. And I kept looking and I said the same thing. I'm like, that's going to be a lot of work, because you want to be consistent with it. You don't want to fall off, do one episode, and you don't come back for another 6 months. So it is going to be a challenge, but I know because God gave it to me, I'm going to have to do it. I got to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, like you said, being consistent and definitely pressing forward and what you're doing. But when you have a heart for people and you have a love for what you do, it comes so natural, and that's kind of like one of the hard part things too, when especially being an entrepreneur, when you love what you do in your heart, you will do it for free. You know what I'm saying? Right. So then it's like, but I do want to make some money.
Right.
So it's trying to find that balance to make it work, work together. So sometimes, you get the money on the front end and then the work comes later. And sometimes you got to work on the front end and the money comes later. Just trying to get that balance. But as long as you have a love for it, for what you're doing and everything, it'll all work out. And just from the outside looking in, because I'm learning so much about you now, because I didn't know that you had written books before. And then I'm looking into it. I'm like, oh, she's an author too. And it's like the second book. I think you're on like the third book now. I'm like, dang, So I'm just trying to catch up with you. So that's why I couldn't wait for this interview because I'm like, all right, I got questions. I want to know. I got questions I need answers.
People actually, they be like, you don't promote yourself or whatnot. Going back to what you're saying. When you do things, for me, I've always been a private person. I love social media and whatnot, but people think I'm on there and that's all of me. And it's like, no, I do a lot of the things on there because I do like, I do love people and but I'm also a very private person. So I don't go in there and I don't promote myself or, I promote everybody else. But I have learned that now is the time for me to start promoting myself on things because people do. They were like, I didn't know you wrote a book. I'm like, yeah, I actually wrote 3 books. And, and they be like, so you don't, I'm like, because honestly, when I wrote my first book, I was not trying to promote it. It was really my journal. And it was really difficult for me to publish it because it was about, what I was going through. So I didn't want the world, but God wanted me to do this. And me and him struggled. I was like, I'm not publishing this. So I did not, I didn't promote it, like that. So it sold, but it wasn't like I went on a book tour or anything like that. But like you said, when you love doing something, it just really it's natural, So I love doing it, but at the same time, I do want to be like, I do want to retire from it, and do something, get paid for it and whatnot. But I love it. I love it.
Okay, so I have a question now. So with your new program, and I'm sure my listeners know because I say it all the time. I love acronyms, right?
Yeah.
I'm an acronym person. So when I see them, I'm like steps. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So what exactly does steps? Because it's an acronym. So what does it
Mhm.
stand for?
It stands for start tackling every problem strategically. And those are actually the steps. So there are like 5 steps to that. Many times coaches will give you, they say, well, I can give you 10 steps on how to do this, that, and the other, which you can, but these are actual steps that I went through on my journey. And what I want people to understand that I didn't create this program overnight. It wasn't like, oh, I put something together and here it is. No, these are actual steps that I went through on my own personal journey over the last 10, 12 years. So at that time, I didn't understand why God was taking me through the fire, but now it all came to. So when he put this in me, and I'm like, steps. And I'm thinking, okay, so I had to start with every problem in the beginning and start tackling that. And it wasn't like okay, this day I'm gonna start, I'm gonna tackle this problem this day. No, it was a process. So out of this, the coaching, I want people to understand that it's a process to healing. You're not gonna heal overnight. You're not gonna heal within day two or whatnot, but it's a process, and you have to stay on that journey. And you're moving up them steps. You're moving higher and higher to your healing.
Okay, so speaking of the process, so when we start talking about self love or implementing self love, understand that it's a process, and when you start your journey or when someone starts that journey, I
Mhm.
think the hardest part of a journey and anything that we do, right, is
Mhm.
the start, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like you know what you want to do or you know what you should be doing, but just to get started doing it, it's like that's
Yeah.
the hardest hurdle. Like even like I restarted running again, right?
Okay. Oh,
And
kudos
so it
to
was
you.
like, all right, I want to make that back a part of my
Yeah.
daily routine. I got to do it. Got to do it. I bought a treadmill and everything. Treadmill sat in the garage for I don't know how long. It's like I know what I want to do. I know what I
Right.
should be doing, but to get started,
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing. But once I actually started, and
Yeah.
I started just walking, and then I realized I did like the treadmill, but when
Okay.
I learned, I liked walking outside even more, right?
Okay.
And I started
Right.
walking out at the park, and when I started that, I'm like, you know what? This was a whole nother thing because now you're
Yeah.
out, you're in the air, all your thoughts are able to be free, and it was so
Yeah.
calming and such a experience for me that now I don't even look at my treadmill. I'm always even
Wow.
now it's snow outside right now
Right.
in Chicago, and I went out and walked the other day. I was the only footprints in the snow, but I was like, I had to keep that routine
Yeah.
and to get out there and do it. So a lot of times, starting is the hardest part. And so
Mhm.
when we start talking about implementing self love, what
Yeah.
do you think will probably be the first one or two steps that a person should take on just getting that process started?
So, and that's a great question because I tell people, and even in the journal, I start with a commitment page. So we don't jump right into the program or the journal. I start with a commitment, and what that commitment looks like is a letter to yourself, explaining or just actually explaining why you want to do this. What is your why for this commitment? Because sometimes we're just doing things because people say, well, you need to do this, or you need to forgive, and you need to love this person, you need to do this. But it's like, why should I do that if this person hurt me, or this entity hurt me, or why should I forgive, why should I love myself? So I start with a commitment page, and that commitment page is just very simple. You're writing a letter to yourself, you know um, telling yourself why you should do this, and what do you want to do, what do you want to see at the end, what's your end result. So really it's I tell people to start with that basic letter. You don't have to be fancy with it. You don't have to use you could be as simple as I want to heal. I want to be loved. I want to love. I want to be free. I want to sleep at night. Okay, so if you want to sleep at night, so now we're going to start tackling what's causing you not to sleep because of something that happened in the past or whatnot. And I tell my clients, I always let people know we're not therapists. I am a coach, so that's what I do. But I do always in the toolbox I have a therapist and psychologist. I'm a firm believer in counseling, therapy, all of that, because that's part of the healing process. We can tell people to pray all day. We can give them scriptures, but if they don't know how to apply it, it's going back in circles. And you're like, okay, and then that's when then another issue comes into play. I don't like God. It's like, this, all of that. So I tell people to start with a commitment page. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to heal? Because some people, let's be honest, don't want to heal. They like the misery. They like where they are. And it's nothing I can do about that. But if you want to heal, then there's going to be some steps and it's going to be a process.
Oh, you said a couple of things and that last one, I part of me really want to jump on that last one, but I'm gonna let that one go. I'm gonna let that one go. But you mentioned two things that I wanted to touch on. One of them was therapy, right? Because I know that just growing up in our communities, a lot of time is looked down upon on in some cases. Some of it is just shame. Even if it's not looked down upon, it's like, well, I don't want to be labeled as crazy. You know what I mean? So we have all those things that go along with even having a thought to even try therapy. But I'm also someone who definitely believes in it. Mm-hmm. And I always have, but one of the things that really made me kind of open up to it, it wasn't necessarily a therapist, but when my mom passed away, and my mother-in-law at the time, they passed away 3 years apart from each other. My mother-in-law passed first, and then my mom passed 3 years later. So going through that time period, which was a very hard time period for me, I went into a deep depression. I talked about it a whole lot of times on the podcast, but I went through a deep depression. I was even thought about committing suicide. That whole time period was just bad for me. But in the midst of it, I went to bereavement counseling.
Okay.
Right? It was a group setting, so it was a group bereavement counseling. But that opened up so much for me to be able to be in that space, number one, and then to be free to be myself, to express myself, how I was feeling, in that space and in that time period, and just receiving the healing that I needed just by releasing, at that point. And I was like, you know what, we are missing such a gem in our communities with therapy and group, whether it's group therapy or personal therapy, to get in a group with people who are hurting the same way that you are hurting, and being able to support each other and lift each other up. So I definitely 100% stand behind therapy. And I'm glad that you do also. Another thing I wanted to talk about that you just mentioned. So your book, the book that's out now, it's a journal.
It's a journal. It's Steps to Self-Love. It's a 30-day journal to building self-love. I put 30 days on there because, of course, the time depends on you. But you can start the process in 30 days because, it takes like the 21 days to form a habit or break one. So within that 30 days, you should be able to make that commitment where you can be on track to say, you know what, this is part of my regimen. This is part of, okay, I need to spend some time with myself. But of course, however long it takes you, that's okay. Because again, there are going to be some moments where you don't feel like writing. You don't feel like tackling anything, because things happen, life happens. But so yes, it's a 30-day journal to self-love, building self-love.
And I like that because I know that writing is so therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
And I've always written, I've always been a writer, but
Okay.
I'm really now trying to kind of getting into journaling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way that I see it, or the way that I explain it for myself is, journaling is like putting a voice to something that you can't necessarily vocalize.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of times we hold in a lot of our emotions, we hold in a lot of our experiences and things that we're dealing with, because we can't necessarily put it into words. And I was actually just having this conversation with somebody today about something else, but I just thought about it. But what I was sharing was that when it comes to writing things down, is such, there's so much power in it, right?
Yeah.
And even the Bible says, write the vision and make it plain. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, a lot of times when we're trying to say something, we don't always have the words to say it, right?
Yeah.
Even in the midst of we're trying to explain it. But when you write it down, you're forced to kind of make your mind put into words exactly what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Because when it's on paper, you can see that it don't make sense.
Right.
You have to go back and read, what am I really trying to say?
Yeah.
And what are the words I'm trying to express?
Yeah.
So by journaling, it gives you that tool to be able to get out those things that is in you, those feelings, those emotions, those experiences. And once you get it out, and the other thing that I think is very powerful with journaling is you can always go back. You can go back to it. And that's something that I've picked up even within this last year, was going back on your notes. Because when we think about how far we've came, sometimes we say all the time, oh, look how far God's brought me. But when you actually do stop and look, go back and look at your notes from, the same date a year ago, like, wow, I was going through that. I was going through that at that time, but now I'm healed from that. And sometimes we don't even realize how far we've came from whatever it is that we're going through. And we look back and say, like, man, God's been so good to me. He healed me from it. And I didn't even realize I was healed. He delivered me from it. I didn't even realize I was delivered. But now that I go back and look at what I put in writing, and I look at the vision of what I wanted at that time, and able to thank God now that I'm standing in the fulfillment of that vision, of that healing, like it's a whole another thing. And it's amazing too. Like I said, I've always been a writer. But with the whole journaling, it's just like it's a whole nother monster. Let me just say it that way.
It's amazing. I tell, and I get, I get it. People are like, well, I don't know what to write. I said the beauty of journaling is you're not putting it on for anybody else. You're really brain dumping. You're dumping everything in your brain. So I'm an educator by career, but half of my journals have the most grammatical errors ever, because I'm just writing, I'm not worried about a capitalization. I'm not worried about punctuation. I'm not worried if it's a full sentence, because I'm just dumping everything, like you said, from the emotions, from everything that's happening. I remember having, when I was going through my rough period with my mom dying. I'm so sorry that my prayers are still with it, because I understand that. I remember one of my journals, it was filled with anger. I was angry. Both of my parents are deceased. So when my mom passed in 2017, one of my journals, I was like, me and God were just, I said, Lord, I'm not understanding this journey. And so that journal is not one of the happy journals. It's really me expressing my honest thoughts with God, and that's the beauty of having a relationship with God, because he wants you to be honest with him. So I may not have been able to verbalize it with my therapist, but I was able to write it down. So one of my journals, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, wow, I was really upset. And then I'm able to, like you say, see that growth of the healing. It's like, wait a minute. Last year around this time, me and God we were not on one accord right now, but look at where I am now. Me and Jesus, that's my BFF, So you look at your growth, and that's healing, because many people don't understand the healing it comes in many forms, it just looks different for everyone. Your healing is not gonna look like my healing. My healing may be like, oh, I was able to get up out of the bed and put some clothes on. That's a step, whereas somebody else is healing like, oh, well, they're able to go and finish work and go to work, still hang out and go to therapy. That's their healing. So everybody's healing process is very different. And that's why I want people to understand with the journaling, it's an outlet. It's an outlet that's safe. It's in a safe space, because again, you may not be able to share with your therapist, or you may not be able to share with your family and friends. And sometimes you just need that quiet, safe space that's going to be for you and God. And then afterwards, there have been journals where I literally burned them afterwards, like a whole journal I've written. One of the journals I did get rid of was after my divorce. It was a beautiful, I love spending money on journals. So, I'm like, I'm gonna keep this journal forever. But actually, after I wrote the Woman on Fire book, God was like, okay, now you can get rid of it. You can release it. And I'm like, no, this is a beautiful journal. Like, this is mine, but I had to be obedient. But what it was saying was that chapter is now closed.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to hang on to that because that was part of your healing. And so I had to burn those pages, and it was a release. It was healing. So sometimes, again, journaling I love it. I started journaling when I was about 10. And, back then it was diaries. So I had the diaries, and I actually still have it. And then it just grew from there. Literally, I have journals for everything. It's ridiculous. I would just pick up a journal. Like, I love, dollar store journals, Barnes and Noble's journals, any journal. And that's why God was like, okay, it's time for you to release your own journal, show people how you actually went through the process. And so that's where that actually came from.
I like that. And one of the things that you said, I just want to touch on real quick when you mentioned about burning the pages. Mm-hmm. That within itself, I had a similar experience earlier, not this year, but last year that I did. I was part of this little group thing. We were doing some things, but that was one of the things that we did was like write down some things that you want to heal from, or some things that you want to release from. And the first step was that whole journaling part of it was getting it out and putting it in words and putting it on paper. But then we did the whole thing of lighting it on fire and letting it burn. And I always say I like when you burn it and the ashes is going up to heaven, taking it up to heaven, and let the Lord work it out. You got to read about it. So those two things, which I didn't even put them together. So you just said that, the journaling on one hand, to write that vision or that prayer, whatever it is, but then to burn it, to be able to release it from yourself. You already released it on paper, but then now that paper sort of is holding it now. Now that paper is holding it. And then you burn it and release it to the Lord. Now it's out your hands altogether. So I love that. I love that. And one of the other things I want to talk about briefly is, when we started talking about the journals and we start talking about this process that we're going through for self-love, one of the things that I think is still definitely a big hindrance with a lot of people is being able to forgive, right? And not only to forgive others, but to be able to forgive yourself. Because a lot of times I know that there are people who make some decisions, in their own lives, and later they regret those decisions so much that they hold themselves hostage, to those decisions. They hold themselves hostage to their past. Right. And, I like to put it this way, just forgiveness within itself. When someone harms you, right, or they do something to you, they put you in it's like they put you in chains or in a prison. But I like chains. Chains is probably better. So if you think of the old pictures of the ball and chain, they're chained, and then they have this big heavy ball that they have to drag around. So when someone harms you or hurt you, they kind of put you in these chains, right? And now you're carrying that hurt around until you're able to release yourself from it.
Yeah.
But the problem that most people don't realize is you hold the keys to the chains. They
Yes.
put the chains on you, but you hold the key to the change, and the
Yeah.
key to the chains are is forgiveness.
Yeah.
When you're able to forgive that person without an apology, forgive them without making amends, forgive
Mm-hmm.
them without necessarily getting closure, but that's the key to you releasing yourself,
Yeah.
from those chains, so you are able to move forward yourself, and and go into your own healing, to heal from whatever that situation was that
Yeah.
you're carrying it around. But I
Yeah.
think that's a understatement, or a misconception that a lot of people have with forgiveness, because it's like, well, they did this to me, I don't want to forgive them, but it's
Yeah.
not for them. And
Right.
most of the time, if you think about it, they don't care anyway. Because
No.
usually after they have offended you or hurt you, they
Yeah.
going on to offend and hurt the next person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they just
Exactly.
going on and doing whatever they're doing, and you're the one that's holding on to it. You're the one
Mm-hmm.
that's hurt from it. You're the one that's still carrying it. And so it's not that you're doing them a favor, or you're
Right.
doing something to help them. You're doing something to help yourself when you learn how to forgive this other person for whatever they did to you, but you're
Right.
releasing yourself from the chains that they may have put on you.
Yeah.
So when we talk about forgiveness, what do you think of one of the major or just I just say, what do you feel is the importance of being able to forgive?
I mean, you hit it. I totally agree. That's just going back off of all of my when I coach people, I tell people I'm not just telling you anything. These are experiences I've gone through, and not just within a year or two, like over time. And so I had to learn how to forgive, because again, it is a hold. When you don't forgive, it is a hold on you. And I can admit, I am very transparent. I was one of those people. I would ask God to strike them down when they hurt me. I'm like, Lord, strike them down. I don't, I don't want to hear they hurt me. They hurt my feelings. Strike them. I was adamant about it because I wanted that revenge. And what I found out every time I would ask, because I was stubborn with it. I was like, I'm not forgiven. They hurt me, this, that, and the other. Strike them, Lord. But it was harming me. Those people they were gone living a life. They were prospering in their endeavors, and I was angry. I had been like angry with things, and it was wearing on me. And you can see it. You know how you can see anger on people, you can see hurt on people, and that's where I was. And then I had to say, okay, God, I'm gonna try it your way. I'm gonna do this forgiveness thing. And once I started that journey, I was like, oh, this was an amazing feeling. Like I was able to understand the purpose of forgiveness. It wasn't for them, it was for me, to release me of the hurt, the pain, all of that, so that I can receive God's blessings, because I couldn't receive God's blessings all because somebody else. No, that wasn't fair. So when I started understanding the purpose of forgiveness, and then I started thinking like, well, I'm always asking God to forgive me, and He forgives us. So I have to really forgive the other person too. Now, what people don't understand is, just because you forgive that person doesn't mean that you have to go back into that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to connect with that person again, because God is like, okay, they did hurt you. That's a given. You can forgive them, but you can part ways, and it's okay. And that's where we get stuck, because we figure, oh, well, I forgave them. I ain't trying, because I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want to, I can't never forget, and I ain't can never forgive. I'm like, so that means you're never forget, you're gonna keep this in your spirit. Like God forgives us, and He throws it out there in the sea of forgiveness. He doesn't hold it over our heads. So we have to understand, let it go, because if not, it's going to eat away at you, and you will not be able to live. And I had to be determined, I want to live. People are going to be people. We already know that. But God's love is so amazing. And it's like I want to be able to experience that with people. So it's like you can look at people, I don't have to deal with you. I forgive you and move forward. And it gets better with time. My great aunt, who's 91 now, she taught me that over the years. She said, never let anybody steal your peace, your joy. And she said, adults, she said, grown folks gonna be grown folks. You can't change them. And I'm like, well, she 90 some years old, so she knows. And that's why I get that wisdom. I learned. I'm like, because she's been there. So I learned and I apply it. So that forgiveness is not for them, even though they will see it. Once I'm like, oh, they forgave me, she forgave me, he forgave me. Okay. And you never know what that would spark in that next person, because we're supposed to be kingdom builders. So we're supposed to be showing these examples. But that forgiveness piece, it's for you. And I tell people, let it go. And the forgiveness is not going to happen overnight. Believe it or not, it's not going to happen overnight. It's also a process, because you got to understand, you're like, so this person harmed me and y'all want me to just forgive that person. So you have to go through that process and show and teach people why you should forgive, or why you need to forgive, because a lot of people don't understand that they don't understand what God it has given us or is doing.
And I one of the things that you said that I really like, which is going to kind of go into the next thing I want to talk about before we go, and that's boundaries, right?
Yes.
Because like you said, people think that just because you forgive, now you got to be back, friends with that person, and y'all got to make amends, and no, that's not the case. You have to forgive for yourself. But once you've been released from those chains, you're not going to go back to that same person to give them the opportunity to put them chains on again. So that's where our boundaries come in. And I always say boundaries serve three purposes, right? Is they protect you from others, they protect others from you, and they also protect you from you, right?
Yes.
So with that forgiveness, after we've forgiven, and then we have to learn how to put up the correct boundaries. Definitely the correct boundaries, because there are some people that you should make amends with,
right?
Let's say if you had a fault with a parent, that is a relationship that you may want to amend,
right?
But and like you mentioned earlier, with everything that you went through before your divorce, I'm sure that was a relationship that you had to forgive in the midst of, but that was one that was like, all right, we done, we good, all right, you go about, you go that way,
right.
So that's where that boundary come in. I'm like, we good,
right.
They want to apologize, but no, I'm good, I accept, stay on over there,
right.
So that's where we get into setting up the healthy boundaries. So if you were talking to someone, and just give us a little bit of advice on just building a better boundaries, or healthy boundaries. Just give us a little bit on that, and then I'll let you have the last say.
Well, and I like that I talk about the boundaries. You have to set those boundaries, like you said. You have to, in order to protect yourself, because again, sometimes when we are building these relationships, one of the steps in the program, or in the journal, I ask you, why do you want this relationship? Even down to your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your cousins. Why do you want this relationship? We have to understand the purpose of the relationships, because we have a lot of broken relationships, and they haven't been healed just simply because, oh, that's our father, that's our mother. But those are relationships that a lot of times need amended, and they need healing. So you have to ask yourself, why do I want this relationship? Why do I want to have a healthy relationship with this person? So that's part of that commitment that I ask people to look into. And it is kind of an odd question for just people like, that's my mother. I said, yeah, I know. But y'all are going at odds with each other. Something is missing. So what is the purpose of your relationship, and why do you want a healthy relationship with your mother? Because a lot of times we don't even think about that. We don't think about having those relations. We don't think about relationships in that term with our, even with our kids and so forth. So I always tell people, you got to understand why. You have to answer your why. What is the reason? What is the purpose of your relationship? What is the purpose of you having a relationship with your coworkers or your friends, your best friends? Like, there should be a purpose in anything that you have, because a lot of times we're just doing it. We're just connecting with people just because, oh, that's my best friend. Why? What value are y'all bringing to each other? What value are y'all adding to each other's lives? And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you come up against toxic relationships within your family, your friends, and so forth, you got to understand, okay, so what was the reason, and how did it become toxic? So the advice I would give to people, you ask yourself, what is the purpose of me in this relationship, and why do I want a healthy relationship with this person? That's something we never really think of. And so that's what I challenge people to think, to answer. Why do I want this relationship? And be honest. Do I want it because people say I'm supposed to have it? Or do I want it because I genuinely want to build a healthy relationship with these people? But you have to start with self. And that's why I specialize in building a healthy relationship with self. Because once you set those boundaries, you eliminate things that are going to harm you, because you have already created what you're not going to accept and what you will accept from anyone. So that's number one, creating those boundaries for yourself. Because when you treat other people, when you teach other people how to treat you, guess what? They don't have a choice but to respect you and treat you the way that you want to be treated.
And that's 100% true, because people usually take on the example that you said, because you showed them
Yes,
how to treat you, how you, number one, how you treat yourself.
yes,
Because if you will allow someone or anyone to treat you any kind of way, unfortunately, that's what you're going to get, people that's
yeah,
going to treat you any kind of way. And so you have to set those boundaries in
yeah,
order for, number one, you respect yourself enough to say, this is what I stand for, and I'm holding myself to these
right,
conditions. I'm holding
yes,
myself to these standards. And then once you hold yourself to it, then it's so much easier to hold everybody else to it, because
yes,
it's like, look, these are my standards first, and I
yeah,
stand on it myself. So if I can
mhm,
stand up for myself and stand on these standards, you don't have a choice. Because if you do
no,
have a choice, then that's when that boundary go come. Like, all right, this is where you stop at right here.
yes,
So
yes,
yes, Miss Trinette, this has been so awesome, so awesome.
yeah,
I'm so glad that you came on. So glad to be able to have this conversation with you. I'm
yes,
gonna let you give us a chance. Let me give you a chance, because I want to know personally, but I know also I want my listeners to know, where can we find you, your social media handles and everything, and definitely where can they reach out to you for coaching and the journals. I definitely want to get that information out. So where can they get that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much again for having me on your platform. I'm super happy for you and proud of you. We need you, so keep going. We need positive platforms like this, and I can't wait to have you back on. But you can reach me on all social media at I am Trinette L. Collier on all platforms, and my website. You can get coaching information and the journals on I am TrinetteLCollier.com. That's www.IamTrinetteL. Make sure y'all put the L in there, Collier.com. And you can book coaching sessions. I do offer a complimentary discovery call, and it just to see if we're a good fit or not. But I have resources on there as well. And again, you can connect, and you can also purchase the journal from the website.
Okay, Miss Trinette, thank you so very much for being on. You could have been anywhere else, but you was here with me, and I definitely appreciate it. To all the listeners, thank you guys for tuning in again. And this is Earnest James, and this is the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. And just remember, our mission is to help people to deal, to heal, and fulfill. To deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. So until next time, you guys be blessed. Hey guys, I know you're enjoying the podcast. However, don't forget to join our text line at 866-326-0730. That's 866-326-0730 in order to receive text messages with new events and things that is going on and new episodes as they release. All right, see you in a minute. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.